Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Leanna and we're going to have a conversation today about suicide, shame and suicide today. It's one of the more, I don't want to say important parts of suicide that I talk about, but it's one that really hits me wholeheartedly. And it's been one that I think my whole family can say that they have faced in the last 20 years. A few people I know of for sure that have faced it. I have faced it for sure. And it doesn't always come as uncaring words sometimes. It's just that people are misinformed really about what suicide is and how it happens. And there's a big difference between suicide and every other death. But anyways, we'll get into that. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming back. So, survivors of suicide. We're going to get into another little subtopic because this kind of brought two things up to me. One, I don't like labels. And I don't like having monikers sort of attached to things. I don't like being labeled a suicide loss survivor. I'm not a survivor of it. I am still managing it. I don't know if I'm surviving it yet. I'm just muddling through every day, trying to learn everything that I can, become better educated about it, at least, if nothing more. But some people think that the word survivor sort of reflects the difficulty that we have to face on top of on top of grief, with the guilt and the shame. And we walk a different path because, while everybody walks a path in grief with, heart disease or cancer, or diabetes, those are the same three that I keep running back to. After grief, you don't have to struggle with any sort of quiet confusion or emotional turmoil inside of you. There may be some of it, but it's not as, I don't want to say it's not as drastic and, kind of put people down, but it certainly doesn't last as long as, mine's 20 years going on now, and I understand it better, and I'm trying to educate other people to understand it better. It's still not a really popular topic. We have a society that attaches a stigma to suicide, and I think mostly because it's not understood. Most of our loved ones are considered cowards for taking the easy way out. It's not the easy way. If you've watched my video on my 2 suicides attempts, maybe the first one might have been, but the second one certainly isn't. We usually get a lot of blame and judgment and exclusion from society regarding our loved ones' suicide. A lot of people don't know how to talk about it, and they just don't want to talk about it. They're really misinformed, and this is why I do this. I want people behind me that are going through suicide, or even ahead of me, or beside me, to have a little bit easier experience than what my family and I have had. Maybe, especially better than what we've had for some of us. I don't think any of us have survived it. I know my mother certainly did not survive it. It pretty much ended her life that day, in terms of her wanting to live. Her body dying out from underneath her was just a time factor in that way. I know my father has struggled with it. He's a very proud man, and to have such a complicated death in his family, I think, has really shaken a lot of his foundations that he grew up with. He's not a young man; he's in his 90s. It's probably, reorganized his thinking a lot about things, especially as he gets nearer to death in his life, I'm sure. It's just viewed differently as a lot of other people's. The funny thing is, actually, I don't want to say funny, but anyways, there's 10,000 Americans who will die in a car accident yearly. And we don't hold them to any blame, whether for, lack of driver training, lack of, safety done on the vehicle, whatever it is, speeding, drinking and driving even, we don't hold them to the same accountability. But with suicide, we seem to think that it is our loved one's intention to hurt us, to leave us with hurt, to leave the world with hurt, that it's kind of like the final word of saying, you know what, screw you, to the world. And if people understood what it was other than that, it's not that at all. It's a really lonely feeling of someone. It's someone who feels they don't belong, that they don't fit in, that they don't qualify to be where anybody else on earth is at the time. They feel so much less than, not worthy of. Hey, I hate to sit here and talk about it for 30 hours, and you probably still wouldn't understand, but it's a very sad and lonely way to die. For me and my family, well, for me anyways, there was an added factor to that, in that we don't know exactly what day my brother committed suicide. We can tell by the state that his body was found in, the number of days that my husband and I were actively looking for him, the last time that someone saw him, that he'd probably been hanging in my mother's basement for about 10 days. That just kind of adds to the whole sadness of it, because for 10 days, for somebody who wanted to say, I give up on life, I'm throwing in the towel, I don't want to do this anymore, just take me home and bury me and let me live in peace. We didn't even know for 10 days what had happened, and that's kind of like a real slap in the face. And I don't know if it's more of a slap in the face for my brother because nobody missed him for 10 days. And that's not true, but I've heard that from people. I was actively looking for him. I did miss him. If I wasn't actively looking for him, nobody would have found him. But it was a slap in the face to us too, because it was kind of like, we didn't even know. We didn't know how bad you were feeling. We didn't know what you were going through. We didn't know that it was this destructive. Or I'm sure some of us would have done something. I would have, for certain. My brother and I were very, very close to each other. But if you have a grandparent who dies, everybody kind of expects that. You expect your parents to die before you, older siblings, whoever, to die before you. You never expect your siblings or your children to die before you. And I can't imagine the grief that my mother or my father even went through. My father's a little bit better able to handle emotions. But my mother and I actually stopped talking the year before she passed away, because I emotionally just couldn't do it with her anymore. I had 3 kids and my grandmother, and it was just getting to be too much. And she was really taking the things that people said to heart, about, oh, what a coward he was. Well, you didn't really expect him to make it anyways, did you? You weren't really looking for him. You didn't really miss him. All of these things that were just kind of thrown at her. And I don't know if they were intentional to hurt her. I can't imagine that they were. But you have to imagine that somebody that already has that grief, to be sort of challenged on the way they feel. So boldly, it's got to be horrific. The American Psychiatric Association says that if you're going to rank traumas throughout life, losing a loved one to suicide is on par with a concentration camp experience. That's a very bold statement, and I'm glad it's not one that I made. I don't really know how much of that is true. Obviously, there's got to be tons of facts behind it. But that should explain to people, because nobody ever challenges a concentration camp experience. But everybody challenges a suicide experience, whether it's my suicide that I went through, or my attempted suicide that I went through, or my brother who actually, completed his suicide. Maybe that'll give people a little bit more understanding of how much of a sensitive subject it really, really is. And it really, really is. The other thing is that people don't understand is it's not entirely depression. Depressed people don't normally commit suicide. And a lot of people don't understand this. It took me a while to understand this until I dealt with both. But depressed people are usually not, don't have enough energy. There's just not enough there for them to actually carry through with a suicide. And you may say, well, you know what, drinking alcohol too much or taking pills too much, that can't be all that much work. But it is, believe me, it is. People often wonder why, and this happens a lot, that only 50% of people that have depression will actually seek help. And of those, you will find that most suicides around depression will occur when their mood starts to lift and they start to feel better, and maybe they're not isolating so much and they've, started to rejoin their friends within that first week or two. We had a friend of ours who did exactly the same thing. And it does seem a little weird because you're thinking, well, they were just starting to get better. He just got a car, he just got this, whatever. But that's when they're still depressed mentally up here. Nothing really up here has changed, but some of their focus on their physical being has changed, and they got, they're getting out a little more through the day or not sleeping all day, have a little bit more energy to do. And then that's when it occurs to them that they do have the energy to fulfill it. And they really just don't want to be here and have another day. And it really is a saddened experience. The other thing, I don't want to go on too long about these. My posts seem to be a little long in the tooth at times. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was I have seen things like this over and over again. Actually, just doing research for this one. I don't know if you can see what it says. I'm trying to get it right angle. There we go. It says suicide is 100% preventable. No, it's not. There is nothing in life that is 100% certain. There is nothing in life that is 100% certified, and there's nothing in life that is 100% preventable. Nobody ever challenges that, and that's just one of those things that just really irritates me. Saying that is increasing my grief when my loved one commits suicide, because you're saying it's 100% that he didn't have to do it. There's 100% he could have reached out to somebody, and that's not the truth. People who reach out are at the very first stages of having a suicide ideation. People who are at the end of it, you couldn't, the day that I was trying to kill myself, you couldn't have gotten me to phone anybody. The only phone call that would have saved me was 911 and had somebody physically come in and stop me from doing it. Talking to me on the phone was going to be a useless activity. I probably was going to keep hanging up on you. So don't say it's 100% preventable, because it's not. You don't know what's going on in somebody's head. You don't know what demons they're dealing with. You don't know if they hear voices or if they see things or if they don't. So that really irritates me. You don't ever say, 100% of lung cancer is preventable, stop smoking. Well, other people smoke. Well, there's carcinogens in the air. You get my point? I don't really like that. I also don't like labels. So I don't like being labeled a survivor, as I told you earlier, because I'm not. I'm still battling it, and I will battle it every day until I die. And whoever is left to take over, hopefully, they're going to battle it every day of their life too, until something changes. But anyways, so I just wanted to share that with you. That's just a little bit on the shame part, a little bit on the guilt parts. We'll get into those more later when I start getting more comfortable with doing this and actually get an intro and that sort of thing. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate you returning. If you're returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me again. Please feel free to leave a comment. I love comments. Like the video, subscribe if you want to subscribe. That would be great. I will probably become more consistent with filming these rather than when the mood shakes me. So thank you very much. See you guys later.